Everyone in the small town loved Frank. Kind, quiet, skilled at his job. But no one questioned why his hands never trembled when drinking coffee, why he always sat near the door. Until that terrible day came. Frank Morrison, was 68 years old and had been cutting hair in Millbrook for 30 years. Frank's barbershop was one of the oldest businesses on Main Street. With its blue and white striped barber pole, vintage chairs, and old photographs on the walls, it was a true nostalgia spot. Frank opened his shop every morning at 7 a.m. Same routine. Unlock the door, turn on the lights, switch on the radio, prepare his tools. Everything was in perfect order. Scissors, combs, razors, all positioned with millimeter precision. The townspeople loved Frank dearly. Polite, patient, never rushed. He would chat with customers, listen to their problems, but never talked about his own life. "I'm a boring guy," he'd say with a smile. "You talk, I'll listen." But Frank had certain habits that no one had questioned. He always sat near the door. His hands never trembled when drinking coffee. He showed perfect control when working with sharp instruments. He seemed to memorize customers' cars, walking patterns, voices, and he never turned his back to the door. Sheriff David Coleman was one of Frank's most regular customers. He came every month to get his hair cut. David enjoyed talking with Frank because the old barber was a good listener. David knew Frank was a Vietnam veteran, but details had never been discussed. That Tuesday morning, Frank opened his shop as usual. His first customer was retired teacher Henry Adams. As the old men chatted, Frank's hand never trembled, his scissors maintaining a steady rhythm. "Frank," said Henry, "you're really talented at this. You work so precisely your hand never shakes." Frank smiled. "Years of practice, Henry. Hands get used to it." At 10:30, young Tom Bradley came in. 19 years old, fresh graduate from the police academy doing his internship in town. It was his first haircut from Frank. "Welcome, Tom," said Frank. "How was the police academy?" "Tough but educational," said Tom, settling into the chair. "Especially sniper training. Breath control, preventing hand tremor, focus. Difficult stuff." Frank's hand paused for a second, then continued using the scissors. "Interesting. About what distance do you shoot from?" "Maximum 300 meters, but our instructor hit targets from 800 meters in Vietnam." "Incredible stuff." Frank continued working silently. Tom watched Frank's face in the mirror. He noticed a momentary change in the old barber's eyes, but didn't think much of it. At lunchtime, when Frank was alone, he went to the small room behind the shop. From the top shelf of an old cabinet he pulled out a small box. Inside were a few photographs, medals, and an old ID card. Staff Sergeant Franklin Morrison, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper. In the photo, young Frank wore a ghillie suit, holding an M40 sniper rifle, posing in the Vietnam jungle. That man from 30 years ago was a very different version of the calm barber Franklin of today. In the afternoon, customers increased. Retired banker Robert Turner, young mechanic Jake Stevens, and high school student Michael Cooper came for haircuts. Frank served them all with the same calmness and precision. At 5 p.m., after the last customer left, Frank was preparing to close the shop. As he was about to lock the door, a black sedan stopped and 3 men got out. Frank immediately noticed them. Their walk, posture, the look in their eyes. These weren't locals. One of them, tall with dark glasses, came to the shop door and knocked. Frank opened it. "We're closed, sir," Frank said politely. "We're not here for haircuts," the man said in a cold voice. "We're looking for Franklin Morrison." Frank's expression didn't change. "I don't know anyone by that name." The second man, short and broad-shouldered, stepped forward. "You did a lot of work in Vietnam, Sergeant Morrison. Some people haven't forgotten you." Frank kept the door open but took a step back. After 30 years, his past had caught up with him. "You're mistaken. I'm just a barber." The third man, young and nervous-looking, pulled out his cell phone. "Our old boss wants to see you. Refusing isn't an option." Frank's mind began calculating. 3 men, probably armed, limited exit routes. But he was still Franklin Morrison, just older. "1 minute," said Frank. "Let me gather my tools." He turned back into the shop and pretended to collect his scissor set. But actually, he took the Colt .45 he'd hidden under the chair for years. He hadn't touched it in 30 years, but his hand still remembered. When he returned to the door, the men had entered. The tall one spoke. "Took too long, Sergeant." "Let's go." "Where?" Frank asked. "A reunion with old friends." Frank knew this wouldn't end well. Some operations in Vietnam were still classified, and some people didn't want those secrets exposed. Just then, the door rang. Sheriff David Coleman entered. "Frank, I forgot my—" "Oh, sorry, you have customers." The 3 men looked at each other. David had his uniform, gun, and radio. The situation had become complicated. David sensed the tension. "Everything all right, Frank?" Frank made his decision. 30 years of quiet life was over. "David, these gentlemen say they know me, but they're mistaken." The tall man turned to David. "Sheriff, this is just old friends meeting. Doesn't concern you." David's hand moved toward his gun. "This is my town. Everything concerns me." At that moment, Frank acted. All the training he'd suppressed for years returned. He drew the Colt and aimed at the 3 men, the movement so fast and fluid that even David was surprised. "Get down!" Frank shouted, his voice no longer that of an old barber but of Marine Sergeant Morrison. The 3 men froze. The tall one tried to reach inside his jacket, but Frank's voice stopped him. "Don't. You know, and I know. I hit targets from 800 meters. At this distance, I never miss." David, understanding the situation, grabbed his radio. "This is David. Need help at Frank's barbershop on Main Street. 3 suspects." 5 minutes later, all the town's police were in front of the shop. The 3 men were arrested. David stayed inside to talk with Frank. "Frank," said David, still in shock, "who are you?" Frank placed the Colt on the table and sat down. "Staff Sergeant Franklin Morrison, United States Marine Corps, Scout Sniper, 1968 to 1971, Vietnam." "But you're just a barber." "I have been for 30 years, but some things are never forgotten, David." The next day, FBI agents arrived. The 3 men turned out to be connected to organized crime and were trying to get information about Frank's classified operations in Vietnam. Frank's identity had been protected by the Federal Protection Program, but after years, he'd been found. FBI agent Sarah Williams spoke with Frank. "Mr. Morrison, we can provide you protection, a new identity, a new place." Frank shook his head. "This is my home. These people are my family. I won't run." "But your safety." "I hid for 30 years. That's enough." That evening, the townspeople gathered in front of Frank's barbershop. Sheriff David explained the situation to them. Who Frank was, what he'd done, why he needed protection. Retired teacher Henry Adams stepped forward. "Frank, you're our Frank. Whatever your past, you're safe here." Young police officer Tom Bradley also spoke. "Mr. Morrison, Frank, I could learn a lot from you." Frank smiled. "I'm just a barber, Tom. But if you want, I can teach you breath control." The following week, Frank reopened his shop. Everything was the same. Same chairs, same mirrors, same routine. But now, no one questioned why Frank's hands never trembled, why he always sat near the door. Because now everyone knew. Frank wasn't just a barber. He was a legend protecting their town. Tom Bradley became a regular customer. Frank didn't just cut his hair, he also taught him attention, patience, and precision. Barbering is. And today I ask you, is there someone like this in your town? Someone who appears ordinary but has an extraordinary past? Remember those people in the comments because real heroes always live among us. We just don't notice. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe. We continue sharing stories of silent heroes.